Hello to everyone. I'm here to present a lesson in facilitating child-centered learning, specifically the topic learner-centered psychological principles. So what are these learner-centered psychological principles? It was introduced to us by the American Psychological Association, or APA, in the year 1990. So originally, there were 12 learner-centered psychological principles, but after 7 years it was revised and it has now 14 learner-centered it has now 14 principles. So we'll go in each principle as we go on in our lesson. Okay, so why is it named learner-centered psychological principles? It's because the researches and theories and education were integrated to that of the theories and researches in psychology. So it was made in order to make or to design a new framework and more effective framework in education. So until now, right? Until now, it is integrated because it was seen. I mean, the effectivity of it was observed in the educational system, the teaching and learning process. So learning this one would help you understand better the nature of learners and the nature of the learning process as well. And with that knowledge, you will now have the idea what strategies, probably what approaches would you use in order to maximize the learning of your students in order for you to become an effective teacher. Well, I know if you're watching this video, I know you would also want it to become the best teacher you could ever be. And so you have to listen very well because understanding the learner is one of the initial steps to be a great teacher. Okay, so these 14 learner-centered psychological principles were categorized into four. We have the cognitive and metacognitive factors. We also have the motivational and affective factors, also the developmental and social factors, and individual differences factors. So some of you might be familiar with the terms that you've read in the screen. So individual differences, motivation, affective factors, developmental factors, and so on and so forth. But we're going to focus on the principles. So start with cognitive and metacognitive factors. The first principle is the nature of the learning process. Okay, and it states here that the learning of complex subject matter is most effective when it is an intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. I wanted to emphasize the term intentional process. This is actually happening inside the classroom, that your learning there is mostly intentional. Why did I say so? Because your teachers come into your class with an end in mind already. So he or she has already the objectives of the lesson, what you will be learning right after the class. And he has already the strategies, the approaches that he or she can use in order for for those objectives to be met. And he has already designed the assessment task to know whether you learned the lesson or not. So it's intentional. Okay, it's an intentional process. And another important terms here is constructing meaning. Okay, so we go inside as educators, we go inside the classroom not just to feed our learners, right, with information, but we help our learners, okay, use the knowledge that they acquired and the experience that they have in order to construct meaning. Okay, so we do not spoon feed our learners, but we help them become constructivists. Okay, they will become creators of knowledge, creators of meaning. Right, so that's the nature of the learning process. Okay, we do not feed the students, but we help them become constructivists. Okay, with of course the guidance of with the integration of effective strategies in teaching. Okay, and successful learners are, these are the characteristics of successful learners. So you could assess your students, or for now you could assess yourself whether you are a successful learner or not. So first, if active, when can you say that your student is active? Okay, when they take part in the teaching learning process. So during discussion, they listen attentively, they jot down notes. During recitation, they share their answer, they share their ideas, thoughts about a certain topic, and during activities, they collaborate with the teachers, they collaborate also with their students. In that sense, students can be described as active. All right. Second, a successful learner is goal oriented. They set goals for themselves. Right. They go inside the classroom because they have certain goal to be met. Okay, they wanted to become professional, they wanted to become a teacher, an engineer, a doctor, and so on and so forth. They set their goals, so that's the long-term goal. Okay, but they must also have the ability to set their short-term goals, so they see the significance of every lesson that you share to them. So successful learners are always goal-oriented. And then the next one is self-regulating. Okay, so they have the ability to monitor their progress, to monitor and assess their learning strategies, whether it is effective or not, and they have the ability to remain focused on learning. So they will not be distracted with environmental factors or peer factors and so on and so forth. So these are the characteristics of successful learners. Okay, so that's the first principle, the nature of the learning process. The second principle is goals of the learning process. So what are the goals of the learning process? The successful learner over time and with support and instructional guidance can create meaningful, coherent representations of knowledge. So it is kind of related to the first one, goals of the learning process. Now, as educators, we have to help our learners set their own learning goals. It's not only the teacher who sets the learning goals, but it's also the students, the learners. If the learners set their learning goals, then they will become more committed in attaining that learning goal. So there must be short-term goal again. There must be a short-term goal and long-term goal. Okay, and as teachers, we must help our students link their short-term goal to their long-term goals. So they have to realize that these short-term goals that they have, okay, would lead to the attainment of their long-term goals. All right, so we help them with the instruction, with the guidance, and so on and so forth. So that's it's the goal of the learning process. Okay, that's the second principle. The third principle is the construction of knowledge. Successful learner can link new information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. Now, learners learn a lot of things. Learners learn from different disciplines, right? Science, math, English, social studies, geography, history, and so on and so forth. They learn also from other people. They learn also from their environment. There are a lot of sources of knowledge. But these subjects or disciplines are not actually isolated. Okay? They are always connected with one another. Okay? And so, as teachers, as educators, we have to help them connect the new lessons or the new learning that they have to the previous lessons that they have. Okay? So that they can construct meaningful learning. All right? They must have the link. Okay? How can we do that? We can use concept mapping, right? We can use graphic organizers to represent the knowledge that they've acquired and link that to the previous lessons that they have. Okay, so there must be integration, okay, with the lessons that they are studying. Okay, so that's the third one, construction of knowledge. The third one is strategic thinking. Okay, now I would want to give an example about, I think this is more of the experience, okay, because not really most of the time, but a lot of time probably, yeah, whenever I give complex tasks to my students, okay, some of the students really complain, right? They would first complain before they would comply because they're thinking that it's very hard to do because they also have a lot of things to do. No sufficient materials, there's no enough time, and so on and so forth. But as a successful learner wouldn't complain but would see that as an opportunity for them to learn because they have strategic thinking, right? So, in the first glance, probably it's very difficult to attain, but the successful learners can make use of strategic thinking, right? How can we achieve this one? It's like, for example, if you're tasked to make a play, for example, right? That's the end of the course. You will be staging a play or a musical, right? So it's first it's very hard to do. It's very laborious. It needs a lot of preparations. But as successful learners, you would think for strategy. So how are you going to do that one? How are you going to rehearse with the time that you have? What materials are you going to use? Um, when are you going to plan, right? Where do you get the materials? How do you practice? And so on and so forth. You would always think of this strategy. How are you going to achieve that one, right? Another example is, for example, you are tasked to give a speech presentation in front of a lot of audience. If you're not into that, if you're not into public speaking, you would still not complain. But if you're a successful learner, you will then complain, but you would think of a strategy. How are you going to develop yourself? If you're not good in public speaking, probably you can start practicing with yourself, right? Listening to your speech, looking at yourself in front of the mirror, and after that, you could invite probably people in your house to see and to see your speech performance and to give constructive feedback in order for you to improve more your performance. So that's it. You have to think for strategy. So there must have strategic thinking, right, in the learners. That's the fourth principle. Okay, strategic thinking. The fifth one is thinking about thinking. Okay, again, it's thinking about thinking. In other words, this is called metacognition. Okay, it's metacognition. So what did it say here? Higher order think strategies for selecting and monitoring mental operations facilitate creative and critical thinking. So as students, they must have the ability to monitor their own learning and assess their strategies of learning, whether it is effective or not. If it's not effective, then think of another learning strategy or to be applied in order to boost your own learning, right? So thinking about thinking or assessing your own learning, if learning strategies, whether it is effective or not. Okay, so that's the fifth principle, thinking about thinking. Okay, and the sixth principle is context of learning. Learning is influenced by environmental factors, including culture, technology, and instructional practices. Again, I want to emphasize this one. So this could affect learning, right? Culture, technology, and instructional practices. Okay, so as teachers, we must be sensitive with the culture of the students. So make sure that whatever cultural background they have, um, um, whatever belief they have, you must have to really accept those, and we have to be sensitive with their culture because there must be equality inside our classroom, right? Technology as well. Okay, we have to use, have to really maximize technology in order for us to boost learning, right? We can use technology for searching, for presenting our lesson, and so on and so forth, and instructional practices. Definitely, yeah, the quality of teaching, the quality of the teachers really matter when it comes to learning. So these factors could influence, okay, the learning process. All right. Okay, so that's the sixth principle, the context of learning. So environmental factors play very vital role in the learning of the students. So you have to be sensitive with the environment and have to make sure that you can take advantage of technology in order for learners to learn best. Okay, so that's the first category, the cognitive and metacognitive factors. The second category is the motivational and affective factors. So we have here motivational and emotional influences of learners. What and how much is learned is influenced by the learner's motivation. Motivation to learn, in turn, is influenced by individuals' emotional states, beliefs, interests, and goals, and habits of thinking. Okay, motivation is just like our fuel to go on. It's our fuel to exert more effort in whatever we are doing because we enjoy it, because we see its relevance, because we know it's meaningful, right? So the motivation must be sustained by the teachers so that students will keep on exerting their effort in learning and they will keep on doing their best during the teaching and learning process. Okay, and it is influenced also by emotional states. Okay, so they must be, motivated. Okay, when they're learning, they must see that, uh, they must feel the, enthusiasm in learning. It's also influenced by their beliefs and interests. Okay, so as teachers, we have to make sure that we have to present something new to our students every now and then. Okay, so that their interest will be sustained. Okay, it's not just they go inside your classroom, they sit down, they listen, they write, and that's it, right? You could adopt, interactive activities so that they will be more interested in the lesson. All right. Okay, and then they set goals and then the habits of thinking. So these could influence learning, motivational and emotional influences. Right. Eighth principle: intrinsic motivation to learn. Learners' creativity, higher order thinking, and natural curiosity all contribute to the motivational factors. Again, creativity, higher order thinking skills, and natural curiosity. Are they curious in studying, right? Or are they just, I mean, it's just nothing, right? They just absorb it without curiosity, without the intention to really master the lesson, or so on and so forth. Intrinsic motivation is stimulated by tasks of optimal novelty and difficulty relevant to personal interest. So it must be, your lesson must be connected to their personal interest and providing for personal choice and control. Now, for more information about intrinsic motivation, specifically on teaching the students how to really how to use their curiosity in learning and how to sustain the interest of the learners in the teaching learning process. I want you to watch this video I downloaded in YouTube. Okay, all right, to learn. Okay, we also have effects of motivation on effort. Well, I've already mentioned this a while ago that if a learner is motivated, they would extend efforts on doing certain tasks. They would extend effort on accomplishing a learning task, right? So that's very important, and that's the reason why we must sustain motivation among our learners. Okay, that's the ninth principle: effects of motivation on effort. Right, and we also have here the individual differences factors. Well, we all know that learners have different intelligences. They have different abilities. They come from different cultural background. In other words, um, they're not similar to each other. Okay, so as learners, we have to see to it that we, sustain the needs of the students, although there is a diversity inside our classroom. So some of us might be good in math, might not be good in math, but good in English. Some of us might be good in English, but not in sports. Some of us might be good in sports but not in arts, right? So we have different abilities, right? And that must be acknowledged by the teacher, and must not level the students if they're not exerting as they're not excelling in or developing in a certain area, because probably their intelligence is inclined to another intelligence, right? For example, in music, right? And so on and so forth. So we must use various strategies so that these individual differences will be catered by the teacher, right? And learning and diversity, okay? So as teachers, we have to consider that our students have different linguistic background, cultural background, so that they feel respected inside the classroom. If they feel respected inside the classroom, they will be more motivated to learn, right? They must know that there's differences. There's a different, I mean, there are differences, that they're diverse, but they have to feel respected, and they must respect also others' diversity. Okay, learning and diversity. That's the 13th principle. And the 14th principle, standards and assessment. Okay, so setting appropriate high and challenging standards in assessment, the learner and learning progress, including diagnostic, process, and outcome assessment, are integral parts of learning process. Why is assessment and standard important in education? Some students hate that, right? But we have to let them realize it's very important, because that would tell a lot when it comes to their learning. Assessment must be used to help students know what fields do they need to learn more, and how far they've learned already. Okay, and you have to remember that you have to set standards as well. Okay, assessment must not be very easy. If assessment is very easy and you always get perfect score, you complain. Why? Because you are not learning something new for that. Okay, because the assessment is very easy. If it is too hard, then you complain, because I mean, an ideal assessment must be one step ahead of the current level of the students. Okay, if that's too hard for them, that would weed out the, I mean, it will just weed out the poor students, right? Who will excel? Only those who are advanced, right? But it shouldn't be. It must be one step ahead of their current level in learning. Okay, so that's a standard and assessment. Okay, and then the last category that we have here is developmental and social factors. There are two principles for this. So, oh yeah, principle 10, developmental influence on learning. As individuals develop, they encounter different opportunities and experience different constraints for learning. Learning is most effective when differential development between, and of course, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains is taken into account. In other words, there must be a holistic learning, okay? Not only cognitive level or cognitive aspect. So learning must be holistic, meaning students or learners must, enhance physical aspect or intellectual aspect, emotional aspects, and social domains. All right, so developmental influence on learning. And then the other one, social influences on learning. Learning is influenced by social interactions, okay? Interpersonal relations and communications with others. We're not living alone. We communicate with other people. We communicate with our classmates, with our parents, with our teachers, with the community. And as we communicate with them, we acquire knowledge, right? We learn something new with our interaction with others. That's why communication skills is very vital in learning. Okay, that's the influence of social factors to learning. Okay, where are we? We're done with that. We're done with learning diversity, standards, and assessment. Okay, that's 14. Okay, so those are the 14 principles in, or learner-centered, 14 principles in learner-centered psychological principles. If you have questions, you can just comment in the comment section, or you can just PM me if you know me personally. Um, and yeah, clarifications. But don't forget, before you end this video, don't forget to hit the bell button, and also please subscribe to get updated with the new lectures that we have when it comes to education. That's it for today, and thank you so much for your active listening.